My name is Megs Reynolds, and I am the Executive Director of the Do More Agriculture Foundation. We are the national voice and champion for mental health in Canadian agriculture. Today, joining me is Matt Kelly, and our topic is anxiety. Matt, can you introduce yourself and tell me a little about who you are and what you do and where you're located?
Like you said before, I'm Matt Kelly. I'm from Water, Saskatchewan. I am a farmer. We farm roughly about 7,000 acres of grains around the water, just south of Watrous here. It's a family farm, so I farm with my brother-in-law and Leslie, my wife, and myself.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for being open to talking today. We really appreciate it. It's such an important topic, and um, it's so helpful when others can hear people sharing their stories and talking about things and know that they're not alone. Our first question, when did you first realize that you were having anxiety or that was kind of increasing in your life to the point where it was time to maybe look at taking steps on how to address it or take care of it?
Well, I recognized that I had anxiety when I was in my early teens. Uh, I I didn't really understand it to the extent, or didn't realize how bad it could get. Early on, I just allowed that anxiety to actually drive me to. I thought it was actually a good driving factor for me to push through and get things done. Growing up with it and just managing it. But as I continue to get older, probably roughly my late 30s, I've taken a job in the oil patch and running long hours, not getting enough sleep, and being at the mercy of the phone. It really started to get bad. So I made a switch and I actually went farming, where I thought that was going to be a good move, but actually it continued on to get worse. Just the separation between Leslie and myself, when we moved back, we were living in Regina, and I was farming 2.5 hours north of Regina at the family farm and living in a camper. I did that for 6 years, and we had two children during that time. Went through a pile of weather adversities, but anyways, that separation is really what the other driving factor was, and also coming into a Leslie's family farm. That's who I farm with, was my father-in-law, who's since passed, and my brother-in-law. But yeah, that's kind of the start of it there. The driving factor of being a non-family member, starting out on a farm, lots of stress, trying to maneuver relationships, maintain my relationship with my wife and the pressures there, and weather adversities. I talked about like 30 inches of rain on the 1 year, pulling combines out. It was just a total battle. So it was starting to take its toll, and I was not dealing with it. I was suffering in silence, and I started to have a lot of mental breakdowns and anxiety attacks, and then that's Leslie's mom is actually the one that actually helped me with reaching out and trying to tackle it. We'd It was starting to get bad that I was letting my mother and father-in-law know that I was going through this, and then Leslie's mom worked at the hospital, and she had a help phone number that I finally, one night, I had to reach out. I had to change what I was doing, right? So
Yeah, I can only imagine I mean, I kind of did a similar process with moving to the farm without having that background, but I can't imagine the additional toll of living in the trailer on the farm, not having that separation from work life, and then also then being distanced from Leslie and your kids, and for the length of time that you did that, plus all of the additional things that go on in agriculture. Your initial comment of, yeah, I thought I'd leave oil and gas and come to farming and that would be a little easier on things. It's a challenging industry for sure. Um, So was it like that proximity with your mother-in-law? Was it that she was there and Leslie wasn't? And so that was just finally someone who was there to have that conversation and say, this is where I'm at, I need help, but I don't know like what to do or who to talk to.
Yeah, well, just the comfortable relationship with my mother and father-in-law, they were a really good support. Also, Leslie, uh, you sh she was trying to be as helpful as she could, not dealing with this before having the tools to help somebody. You can only talk about it for so long before you have to kind of go outside of your support mechanism. So I felt like a burden because I was actually she was dealing with two young children and working for FCC at the time, and her plate was full too. And so was my mother and father-in-law's, but they were the closest thing that was there, that they understood that that I was suffering, and yeah, it was, the sleep deprived, the anxiety attacks, I just I kept getting deeper and deeper into that. It would turn into depression also, right? I am normally a bubbly type of person, always cracking jokes and having a good time, but yeah, I was just started to become quiet and reserved. So they were asking questions. They were, and I felt comfortable with them to talk to them. And we'd had a couple conversations. It wasn't just a silver bullet, right? It took some time in order to get the answers, or got me steered in the right direction, right? But like I said, it's still it's an ongoing thing, right? Finding those answers or what works sometimes, change also is a good thing, right? So
What was calling, when you talked about calling that support line, what was that like for you the first time that you reached out to utilize that help?
it was amazing. Like I never talked to a therapist. I had a predetermined notions beforehand. Being that, we're dealing with, millions of dollars business, different people involved, different lenders, you know renting from different people. You kind of wanted to keep yourself sheltered. You didn't want to have that affect your business, or have somebody look down on you and maybe pull land away from you. So yeah, I had a lot of predetermined notions and a lot of things that just didn't make any sense. You were grasping at straws, or overthinking things, right? So when I made that first phone call, yeah, it was it was just like a release. I had some apprehensions about doing it. I'd made the phone call, and I was thinking, oh, there'll be somebody saying, do this, do that. No, they actually, the person that was on the other line was very comforting, and just, they take your name and number down, but it's confidential. And then away we went. She was just asking some simple questions, and I talked to them for probably 2.5 hours, and just was a mind dump of things that were, you know I thought were irrelevant, but it just, kind of peeling back the layers of the what I was going through mentally, and get me off the merry-go-round. I is the way I like to call it, because that's kind of what you get onto. You're just super focused on the negative things, and you don't have the ability to look forward and get some direction, right? To get your feet moving in the right direction, to get that release, right? And actually, that was the first night I'd slept probably, I'm saying 8 to 9 hours at night. And that was huge. It got me going in the right direction, and then I continued on, right? So
That's amazing. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty around the support lines from people. So it's so great that you're able to talk about it. And it's so amazing that, they just the training they have to be able to go and have that conversation with you for 2.5 hours. And like you said, peel back the onions and talk about the, different like how to look at things and some coping things, and to the point where after that call, you were able to sleep. Like, I think
yeah,
that that's such an important thing to highlight, that, and I don't think you need to be at what some people might feel is like up against a wall full crisis mode to be calling the support lines. I think there's a lot of opportunity even just to say you're feeling a certain way and having faith in the fact that that's going to be someone that can talk you through that feeling or emotion.
Yeah, and like even just giving simple tools, like it wasn't rocket science. It was, if you have these thoughts, just even journaling, right? Just start a journal and write them down, and yeah, just give you some tools because yeah, when it comes down to it is get the tools, then it's the balls in your court. You have these coping mechanisms that you need to get you going in the right direction, right? So, but and I phoned it a couple times too. Like it's not, I didn't just do it the one time and just was like, oh, there was a massive relief. It was a couple times, right, that I had phoned too. So, but
Do you feel like there are any aspects of um, anxiety or what you've experienced with anxiety that you think others may not understand or that you wished other people understood?
yeah, I think it. Well, yeah, I totally just being how I was raised, and just the influences around me of, you know, uh, different people, who I've grown up with, like coaches, friends, family, different things, um, that predetermined notion that you're supposed to be tough, just put your head down and just go through it. And sometimes that works for certain people, but like myself, I was caught. I thought I was I'd made a mouse out of a molehill also, right? Like I'd got caught into that anxiety, depression, didn't have any tools in my toolbox to help me with that. So you essentially you were suffering in silence. You didn't know where to turn, right? So it's all that the male persona, and I'm not whining. I don't want to come across as a whiner or anything like that. This is just what I went through, right? And what I had stuck in my head, and maybe I had notions that being a male is not to ask for help and complain and do those things, right? It was trying to get outside that box and just be honest with myself. And I think it boils down to the person, right? And having the ability to ask for help, like when you are going through it or not understanding what's going on, or if it's a recurring thing like that. That was my problem. Is you'd ride that roller coaster, right? Of emotion, and it is emotion, and then it just manifests itself, right, into depression. And that anxiety just is it's just an animal that can consume you, right? So
And I don't like we didn't grow up learning about it either. So for me, that's on top of that stigma of like you need to be tough, you need to, know, not show that something's going on or just put your head down and deal with it. Like that there's that when we do have things going on and you talk about like the anxiety being like that beast, but not really knowing until you are able to reach out to a professional and talk about like what is going on or what is this that I'm feeling or what does this mean?
oh yeah, no, definitely. And it's amazing the amount of people after even talking about what I've gone through and being open about it is it's amazing. Like after we did the Bell Let's Talk event, and a lot of there was a lot of fear there of almost walking naked in front of everybody. And again, like what are people going to think? But it was amazing how many people had reached out from the local community that I'm from, originally from Imperial, and everybody from watchers to Holdfast to people I'd worked with in Davidson, and people I'd worked in Alberta with when I was in the oil field. People that had reached out and saying, "Hey, you know what? Me too. This is something that's people are struggling with and are battling, and that we need to talk about it, right?" So
Yeah, normalize it. It's such a powerful thing to share stories. How do you like with farming and with the seasonality of grain farming, are there tools or things that you do knowing that we're coming up to seeding? So is there something that you do knowing that you're probably going to get a little less sleep, or there's, going to be more stress during that time of year to prepare yourself to go into that season?
Yeah, there is. It's about being prepared. Like being prepared before we go into the season. That like my role on the farm really is I'm a mechanic by trade, so I've got a lot of the equipment ready to go. Seeds in the bin, and we're prepared about having everything as prepared as we can. Also, I've had to rewire myself, it's still an ongoing thing, with trials and tribulations with farming. Nothing's ever, perfect. I've got to ask for help more, right? Instead of trying to feel like I've got to do it all, I have to be able to, delegate. Or, we even, my brother-in-law and Leslie will have a bit of a phone meeting to see, how the day, week, month, or I should go the other way. It should go, what's our plan for the month, you know, uh, week by week, day by day, and then hour by hour, kind of gets broke down that way. And then, it's kind of like, well, how's everybody feeling, and being honest with, oh, I'm panicked. Well, okay, well, what do we need to deal with, in order to get over those hurdles? And then like myself, the ability to step back, and allow people to do the jobs I normally do. Like I'm the main seeder guy, right? So as long as the drill's up and running, we have a guy that'll come out and run it, or Derek will run it, and I'll go home and get some sleep. And that, that's a key thing there, is to get some sleep. And in those busy seasons, if I'm what are as rested as I can be. I know it's not perfect. You got to push when you got to push, and I can go with the best of them. But sometimes when we do have a rainy day, it's, spending a few hours catching up on some sleep. I have a few things, like I normally carry a notebook with me, so I'll do some quick journals entries or whatever, about what I'm thinking. Also getting off the tractor and doing a little bit of exercise, do a little stretch, get a little bit, get the blood flowing. Um, yeah, and just being open. If I do need help, I'll ask for some help. And then also, if unforeseen things that do happen, if I'm on the tractor and have no ability to get away, and if I'm mulling over something, I'll phone the farmer's helpline too, and have a quick call with them, and just kind of do a mind dump too if I'm caught, right? But usually yeah, I'm got to be in a real bad situation there if I've got a phone there. But I know that's my fail safe. That's usually my slam dunk in order to get me back, you know, on the straight and narrow, right? So, but
I think those are really good tips just in general for anyone, especially on farm, with the challenges that can come in the busy seasons. And that's not just grain farming, it could be calving, it could be what have you. But to recognize that, checking in with each other. And then if someone is comfortable and open to saying, hey, I'm having a tough time, like what can you do or shift so that maybe that person does get a break, even though that's not something we traditionally do during that season, but understanding the importance of that for our mental health and our mental well-being. And then just trying to get yourself to the kind of the best that you can be before you go into it. I like to say it's no different than like getting the cedar out and going through it and making sure there's nothing on it that's going to break down the second you get into the field, that we need to like look at ourselves the same way before we go into those seasons and do that like self-maintenance piece.
yeah, and cut yourself, and also the ability to things can be. I'm a perfection. I like to have perfection, but also be honest with yourself. Is perfection, you know, it's hard to do, right? There's always going to be mistakes. You just learn from those mistakes, and like I said, yeah, and nobody's perfect. I still get caught in the anxiety, and and not think and and get caught up in the day-to-day operations. But you got to have a bigger picture. And what are we doing? What are we doing this for? I'm doing this for my family, for my kids. We're building a business, we're maintaining a business. I'm living my dream essentially, right? So I have to just sit back and sometimes just let enjoy the world around us, right? So
Yeah, that's very important too. It's easy to get caught up in that like never-ending list and not step back and be like the why or take some enjoyment in the fact that that's what you get to do and who you get to do it with.
yeah.
What would you tell someone who um, might be struggling with anxiety or just struggling in general or thinking that they might be? Is there any like advice you would give them or encouragement perhaps?
I'm thinking my thoughts are right now is just to be honest with yourself. If things are becoming too much to handle and your day-to-day operations, if it's starting to affect, your life or your livelihood, maybe it's time to maybe do reach out. Um, you know, there's simple things that you can do and simple changes that you can change your perspective, you know, and just I think just be honest with yourself, and honest with that the answers, if you're willing to do the work and believe that there is an answer out there in order to manage it or make things better, you got to be willing, right? So having and just be willing to be open to having a conversation. And if a person doesn't feel open to having a conversation with family members or whatever, maybe you're reaching out to a professional, behind the scenes. You don't have to, like I said, I I commend people if they're just look for answers, elsewhere. There's a lot of simple things a person can do, and there's some, maybe phoning a therapist. That's, another option. So, but just be willing, right? So,
Yeah, that's all great advice. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you feel like we should have touched on?
uh not that I can think of. I just want to come across as a honest, an honest way that I dealt with it, I guess. I don't know, maybe people can relate to me. I think having that honest approach like that to be willing to look for those answers if you are having troubles. What worked for me might not work for somebody else. There are, medications out there even too, right? So and I had taken them too. I've been on medication, but I'm not anymore. We've got the train righted here, but sometimes that's what people have to be on. So and that's fine. There are, like I said, there are answers out there.
Yeah, and it's so important to highlight that what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for the next person. And sometimes, just depending on what is going on in your life, maybe what you need in that moment is different than what you needed a year ago, right? Or a month ago, just because of all of those other influencing factors, especially in agriculture.
Yeah, and there's so many things that are different and different stories, right? It could be weather, it could be finances, right? Like it could just be an awful year, it could be bugs, the spectrum's huge, family loss too. And yeah, we've been thrown all of that stuff, and changes in our dynamics of our families and living conditions and stuff. And there's always outside pressures, right? So
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today and for talking and sharing your story. It's like I said, I think one of the most powerful things we can do outside of like getting the help that we need and taking care of ourselves is sharing our stories so that other people know that they're not alone and breaking down that stigma.
well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
If anyone is looking to learn more or for more resources, you can find everything at our website, which is domore.ag, including support lines to call.